Hey, Steve, thanks for joining the podcast. It's not every day I get to have someone in Santa Barbara down the street on our podcast. So thanks for joining.
Yeah, my pleasure. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Yeah, we even though we live in the same town, we don't get together as often as we should.
Well, we live in a small town, and I know you live out in the burbs. I live in a different part of the burbs, and in Santa Barbara, going 5 minutes is too far. So
I know. I'm like half an hour away, so that's like, oh my god, that's like a week around.
You might as well be in San Francisco. So, Steve, I think we've known each other for a while. I think we first met when you were working at Logic Monitor, and you founded that company. But maybe if we get into Logic Monitor and what you're doing now, it'd be great to kind of rewind a little bit. I know you started on the technical side at end users like National Geographic and UCSB, University of California, Santa Barbara here in Santa Barbara. And then you kind of transferred from, kind of end user to tech company to founding companies. And now I think you're on your second or third. So maybe you kind of walk us through that transition, what you've learned, what you've appreciated, what you're still learning. So we can share that with our audience.
Yeah, well, I am Australian. That's maybe evident from my accent, but I've lived in California for longer than I lived in Australia, so kind of diluted. But I studied computer science and law in Australia with a minor in my computer science degree. My minor was in accounting. And without foresight, that turned out, those three combinations of accounting and computer science and law turned out to be a really good foundation to found companies, although that was not at all what I was expecting. But those are really the fundamental skills, academic skills that you need to kind of start a tech company. So I moved to the States after I graduated, and my first job was in basically help desk for an insurance company. Again, I got lucky without planning in that the insurance company got bought by a big East Coast company, Chubb, which probably most people have heard of. Mm-hmm. And so they wanted to connect their systems. And so I got to set up a Novell NetWare to IP SNA gateway, so connecting NetWare servers to an IBM mainframe that the computer system had. And this was 30 years ago, so early in the days of the internet. So because I managed to set up one computer with an IP address and hook it up into our NetWare system, that qualified me to run all of the campus backbone for UCSB.
Very good. Very good.
I set up one system. So there's been a lot of fortuitous luck in taking advantages of events unfolding at the right time through my career. But I think those opportunities are happening all the time. Like, when I came into IT, it was like, oh, the internet, IP is starting. But that was really kind of before the internet as it is today. So when I got hired at UCSB and one of the hiring people asked me, what do you think is going to happen on the internet? It's like, well, commerce is going to happen. And this was before commerce had happened. And he was like, oh my God, that's so right. Yes, that's going to be the next big thing. I didn't take advantage of it, but I knew it was going to happen. I was more just interested in playing with the technology. So I got to use UCSB as my laboratory to learn network routing really well, and transferred that to National Geographic, and then came back to Santa Barbara and tried to start a consulting firm. And then kind of the first customer that I reached out to was a professor from UCSB who was starting Expert City, a SaaS, early stage SaaS company back then. Mm-hmm. He said, no, I don't want you as a consultant, but we'll offer you a job. So I took that, which was also just kind of another stroke of luck. That became Expert City. Did GoToWebinar, GoToMyPC, all those products got acquired by Citrix. So that was nice. And then I did kind of the similar thing, ran the data centers for an online advertising company, FastClick, who went public, then got acquired by ValueClick. And so I was running data centers for all their server farms. And lots of interesting times, lots of things going on. The .com rise and bust happened while I was working at Expert City. So there were all sorts of things like we'd be in a data center, everything humming away, hundreds of servers there, and then we get a call saying, hey, we're your data center provider, we've gone bankrupt. You have 30 days to get out. Exciting times. So I working in as an SRE, which I was in those days, even though the term didn't exist back then. The thing that I always found problematic was monitoring. So I was, after ValueClick bought FastClick, I was looking around for a business I could do for myself, because I was kind of inspired by Klaus, who started Expert City, and the engineering team. There were 3 guys that started FastClick, and I was like, these are regular people, and they started a business, and it went really well and succeeded. From my background in Australia, growing up with none of my parents went to university. My dad was a policeman. My mum didn't work. It was never in my purview that an ordinary person could start a business and succeed. So working in startups was actually very inspiring for me. I was like, yeah, I can do that. So I looked for an idea, bumbled around in the advertising space for a while, realized I didn't know enough about the business side. The thing I knew was technology and the problems that I'd lived, which was monitoring. So that was the foundation of the impetus of starting Logic Monitor, get the monitoring product that I wanted to run SaaS companies. So that's that was an interesting journey. Founded that, stayed with the company for 11, 12 years till it was an overnight success. Eventually acquired by Vista Equity. And that was a good outcome for me and lots of people, actually. So that was actually a very rewarding thing, was the impact that the positive outcome of Logic Monitor had on all the employees. So there were people that got some money from that and were able to realize their dreams. One guy went off and traveled around the world for a year and went surfing. Another guy went back to open a restaurant, which had been his dream. So lots of gratifying things from that. And then took a bit of time off, worked with Andrew at Logic Monitor. He was the founder of Sidero Labs, where I am now. I was one of his seed investors because I saw how smart he was at Logic Monitor. And I came on as CEO after that company had been in existence for about a year. So that's a long rambling introduction.
No, that's great. Yeah, I think I know Klaus is involved in a lot of things here in Santa Barbara. And I think getting to cut your teeth as a founder entrepreneur is important, and having an opportunity is the most important thing, right? So some people find it, to your point, like by solving a problem that they want solved, serendipitously, kind of meeting someone who knows how to run these businesses and having them as a mentor. Sounds like you got a little bit of both, which is
ideal, I mean,
right?
Klaus and Andreas, who was the CEO at Expert City, they were both very inspirational to me in realizing it's you don't need to come from a family of stockbrokers or whatever to start a business, because neither of them did. They were also both very helpful, and in the mentorships, Klaus would, when I said I was going to start a business, he would give me a big stack of books and textbooks and grill me on my presentation deck. So he was very helpful. Great guy. Nice. And they're both involved in a lot of, as you know, a whole lot of the Santa Barbara tech scene.
Yep. So if we go back to Logic Monitor, you said that was the product that you wanted to have when you were growing up, I guess, in the IT space. And then you said it was an overnight success. So walk us through a little bit about what what kind of the problem was that you thought you were going to solve. Was it actually the problem that needed to be solved was a little different? And then how did that kind of mature and evolve? And then how did the market evolve, right? Because it's one thing to come up with a great idea. If the market's not ready, too early or too late, it can be a challenge. And then also how you actually go to market and execute that is a whole another challenge.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
A little bit about that.
Yeah. So because I worked at Expert City or Citrix Online and ValueClick, FastClick, I was early in the SaaS world, although back in the day, they used to call them application service providers rather than SaaS. And so my issue was, it is ridiculous that I have to build large scalable infrastructure with multiple servers and replication and all this stuff just to run a monitoring system. Why isn't anyone running a SaaS-based monitoring system? Because back then, 15 years ago, no one was. So that was what I wanted. I wanted to build a SaaS-based monitoring system that worked at the scale to sell to other SaaS-based companies, because that was what I could not find. So that was what Logic Monitor started out as being. So the initial target was purely SaaS-based companies that wanted SaaS. And that was great timing in some ways. And, we were early. So when we first launched, there was a lot of people saying, nope, we can't have any data leaving our premises. We can't trust SaaS. We can't, we can't have this out of our control. But then there was enough companies that some companies that did were willing to take that risk. And then, so being SaaS started out as a headwind, and then very quickly over the course of like 8 years, switched to a tailwind, where companies said everything should be SaaS, which was what I thought earlier on. It's like, if it's not your core product, you should be not focusing on the infrastructure. Like well, people do, but most medium-sized businesses should not be running their own Exchange servers when Microsoft will do that for you and do it better. So being a SaaS-based company started as a headwind, turned into a tailwind. I started off thinking I was only building it to sell to SaaS companies. Turned out that managed service providers, which was not a market I knew anything about, were effectively SaaS companies for their customers. So they turned into a big segment of our customers, and also a big channel, a resale channel. And they basically didn't need a whole lot of difference in the product. They needed some extra reporting, which was easy to do. So that was good. And then enterprises, I didn't think we were building a tool for enterprises, because in my naivety, I hadn't really worked at enterprises that kind of needed the scale of SaaS companies, but there are a lot of them out there. I was constantly shocked at Logic Monitor, and I'm constantly shocked at Sidero Labs at the size of companies doing obscure things that you've never heard of. At Sidero Labs, we are in discussions with a company in Europe that makes robots to milk cows and manage cow feces. And they have 25,000 locations around the world. Like, who knew?
Yeah.
And they're going to run Kubernetes on these robots that milk cows using our software. So it's pretty cool.
I think to your point, as an entrepreneur, you kind of go in with an idea. You have your own kind of perspective and your own challenges. And for you, is building something for yourself, because you're like, people like me have this problem. And then you get out there and you're like, oh, actually, like, there's so many different directions to go with this. And I think it happens in a sequential way. Like, you can't do all of them at once.
Yes.
So it sounds like, you guys were focused, you found the channel, then you said, okay, then we got this kind of sorted. Now let's go to the large enterprise. It's a good way to also, I think, cut your teeth as a founder and CEO, starting with smaller companies, starting with companies who are ready to help you evolve your product, like the channel partners, right? They probably were using a lot of different things and wanted something different and would be a partner to you. Because, and I talked to a lot of CEOs who say, like, definitely don't have your first deals be large enterprises. Because if you screw that up, you are screwed up in that account forever. You are not invited back. So do not screw that up. Unless you're ready, right? And then sometimes you are ready because you've been in stealth for 7 years. To your point, you're on your 8th year and you're ready to go. You're ready to go to enterprise.
Yeah. I mean, interestingly, at Sidero Labs, so the current company that I'm at, so we make software that makes Kubernetes easier and more secure. Our second deal ever was an enterprise deal with Nokia. So that was purely because our technology is very differentiated. From a company point of view, I can honestly say we were not ready for an enterprise deal. We did not have the product worked, the technology was great, but we did not have the things that if I was an enterprise buyer, I would expect, like even things like decent documentation. It's taken us a while. We have all those places in place now where you expect audit logs and SOC 2 compliance and the things that are kind of table stakes for an enterprise, but you can get away with not having complete enterprise readiness as long as your technology is very differentiated and adds significant value. So, but otherwise I wouldn't recommend it. Mostly I wouldn't recommend it because the sales cycles are so slow. It's much easier to close a mid-market deal in 3 months than an enterprise deal, which may be 5 times bigger, but it's going to take 8 times longer.
That's right. All right. Well, why don't we talk a little bit about Sidero Labs? You mentioned it's a pretty differentiated technology. What was interesting when you first started talking to Andrew?
Yeah.
What has kind of changed since then, and what are the market forces you are seeing both as headwinds and tailwinds over the past couple of years, and where you're going?
Yeah. So at Logic Monitor, we had lots and lots of data infrastructure because we were processing lots and lots of data. So when Kubernetes, we started as a monolithic application at Logic Monitor, and that needed to be broken up into a service-oriented architecture and microservices. And Kubernetes was kind of the natural way to do it, although there was some debate whether Docker Swarm was the thing to do at that time. But we chose Kubernetes, Andrew led up that project, and it worked really well. However, when Andrew was doing that and heading up our Kubernetes operations, he noticed that it's like there's a whole lot of duplicate work that shouldn't really be necessary, because you basically have to set up your Linux systems and lock them down and patch them and do user management and keep them up to date. And basically you have to repeat all those operations on the Kubernetes layer. And so he kind of had the insight. It's like, if all I really need to do on this server is run Kubernetes, why do I need all this other stuff? Because if you're installing, Red Hat or CentOS or Ubuntu or whatever, by default, it's going to install, it's going to install a web server, and it's going to install, systemd and package manager and all these components that really you don't need. So he basically looked at it and said, for these systems, all I need to do is load the kernel, load the containerd application, and the kubelet to start Kubernetes, and that's it. So he wrote an operating system from scratch, basically just started with the Linux kernel and just added in exactly what you need to do that. So to start Kubernetes. So, from my days back in running data centers of hundreds of servers, which was in FreeBSD and early Linux, that just seemed like the biggest innovation that I'd seen in operating systems in 30 odd years. It was great. So it was like, oh, I only need to do one thing. I just do that one thing. It's completely changed the way of managing it. It leaves all the resources of the computer are not being consumed by the operating system. They're all available for the workloads. And you can't have security vulnerabilities or bugs on your server operating system in components that aren't installed. So it's like, oh, there's completely immune from SSH bugs and systemd bugs and all sorts of common CVEs that are out there. So that was what excited me. It was just like, oh, this is really the most innovative thing I've seen in Linux in 30 years. That's what got me involved as an investor and then came on as CEO. There was some adjacent products, like CoreOS was kind of a similar concept. CoreOS predated Kubernetes, so it wasn't quite as purpose-built or minimal. And then it got acquired by Red Hat, and then they had to, understandably, they changed its philosophy that like they wanted it to support the Red Hat package manager and all the things from their legacy. So they changed its design fundamentally. But Talos Linux, which is our primary initial product, literally all it can do, it's a Linux operating system that starts Kubernetes, and it's not managed by the usual way. So this is kind of the headwind. It is it's such a redesign of the way Linux is that there's a bit of a headwind in that there's such a learning curve. Like you do not log into a Talos Linux box. There's no console that you can do anything on. There's no SSH daemon listening. You can't telnet to it. You manage it through an API, just like Kubernetes. You create a YAML file, you apply it, and it declaratively says this is the way the machine should look. That is architecturally beautiful, and people that get it really love it. But when you're first trying to administer the system, it's like, wait, how do I SSH in and change my resolve.conf? You don't. You do it through an API. So a little bit of a learning curve, but once you get it, it's like it's much, much faster and much more scalable, and it's actually a very elegant system.
That's pretty cool. So let's talk a little bit about maybe when you first were doing Kubernetes at Logic Monitor, and then kind of where you are now, and how you've seen organizations mature, because Kubernetes has been around for a little while, right? But it still hasn't hit the mainstream, I'll call it. And so I'm curious what you've kind of seen in the adoption of Kubernetes with customers. What's the thing that's kind of slowing them down? Is it the complexity, to your point? Is it the kind of change management? Is it the talent? What's kind of the issue kind of slowing it down? Because it has so many great things, and the web scale companies and the most advanced companies are doing it, and they're seeing amazing results, and they're able to really be able to iterate on product and build better digital products because of it. But I don't know about that, robot cow milking farm. and how they got into it,
No, that's it. It really is true that it's a very powerful, very appropriate tool for a lot of use cases, but very complex as well. So when I first came into the kind of this, like, I didn't use Kubernetes at Logic Monitor. I left that to Andrew and the clever SREs. But when I here at Sidero Labs, when I had to play with it a bit, it was like the promise of it's not even the promise, the ability of Kubernetes to automatically scale deployments across server farms and scale them up and down and make sure there's the right number there and resilience and fault tolerance. That's great. It's a real thing. It works. It does what it says it does. But to get there, the complexity is like kind of ridiculous. Especially if you're doing things like, cluster API. It's like the amount of work you have to do just to make your operating system ready, then to deploy Kubernetes. And then once you've deployed Kubernetes, there's still a lot you have to do. It's like, oh, now you need an ingress controller, and you need a CSI to define your storage, and a CNI to manage your networking. It's like, there's a lot of it that's just like, it's kind of overwhelming if you come in as a traditional systems administrator, because it's like, it is purely a distributed system, and distributed not only in the workflow orchestration, but in the way the software is managed. So simplifying that is kind of what we do. And what I've seen, back to your questions about where people are getting stuck, it's certainly not ubiquitous at this point. So most of the deals that we're seeing are still greenfield. Certainly, we are getting some replacements of other systems, but most people are just rolling out Kubernetes at the right time, for the first time now. One of the things that I wasn't expecting coming in was the degree to which Kubernetes is being deployed at edge locations, like on robots to milk cows. That I did not think 4 years ago, I did not think that Kubernetes would have been the right choice to run automation on a single computer. And yet that is happening very widely. It's like, we've got the French National High-Speed Railway System running Kubernetes on trains. We've got companies running factory floor automation where they're sorting mail for large mail processors. We've got medical laboratory companies running Kubernetes on single devices that they ship out to medical laboratories, because Kubernetes helps them standardize whether they're on a single computer or a high availability cluster of 3 computers or a big data center. It's the same infrastructure, the same management, the same APIs, the same securities. So that consistency and smoothness amongst the development cycle does have a lot of value. So so the edge place is where we're seeing a lot of growth and a lot of value that, if you'd asked me 3 years ago, I would have said, no, that's not going to happen. It'll be some other technology on the edge.
So are you seeing more opportunities on edge than in the main kind of IT ecosystem, or you're kind of saying that that's an interesting space that you didn't expect it to be?
I don't know that we're seeing more, but we're seeing more than I expected. So of our current customer base, the edge is probably about 40%, which is a lot more than I thought it would be. But also the bigger deals that we're talking with are mostly edge. So, and again, all sorts of interesting use cases, like people flying autonomous drones to deliver food, milking cows, high-speed trains, healthcare, robots. It's like, just, there's less interesting things like retail sales, point of sale amongst thousands of stores, but there's like all sorts of things going on in the edge, which is very interesting. And one of the advantages we have is, because our operating system is so tiny, we can run on things like, a Raspberry Pi with 2 gigs of memory. Wind farms, for a lot of some reason, there's a lot of edge compute at remote energy locations where they're doing solar charging or power management or wind farms and stuff like that. So pretty interesting.
Yeah, it makes sense. And it makes sense why enterprises are, when they're investing in greenfield, they're like, okay, I'm going to need to rethink this whole thing, do something brand new, versus when I'm trying to retool my IT team. Am I really going to bring in a lot of new SREs and bring in new talent and rescope everything? That's a huge undertaking. I'm just going to keep milking my legacy, to use your earlier milking comment. Okay. So you talked a little bit about your differentiator. Let's talk a little bit about the maturity of customers and, the conversations you're having with, executives in tech. I know the tech people are excited about Kubernetes. They're excited about being able to manage it easier. What are some of the business benefits you're seeing along with Kubernetes, whether it be edge or within central IT, that you're hearing from tech executives?
Different. So in the US, so if you're doing a product on the edge, then that's that's a product-driven decision.
Yeah.
And using Kubernetes for that, it's usually because they want the consistency and standardization on the APIs that Kubernetes gives them. If they're deploying Kubernetes in the first place in a data center, that may be because they've been running Kubernetes in a cloud provider, and the cloud is great. It's a really great system for validating things and scaling things when you have elastic demand, but it also gets very pricey. So we are seeing customers moving some portion of their workload from public cloud into private data center. We're seeing a lot of that for price-based usage in the US, for privacy and regulatory-based reasons in the EU, where they're moving off American hyperscalers into their own data center, or that's what they've always been doing. And we also have some nice capabilities there, because Talos Linux and our Omni management product have kind of integrated network level encryption that's just transparent and works and does automatic key management and keeps things secure without adding any workload, which is great because it means you can have a fixed number of servers in your data center that you own and make a cluster out of them. But if you need extra capacity, it can dynamically burst up into Amazon or Google or Azure or Hetzner or your local cloud provider, and make sure that is part of the same cluster, but all traffic is fully encrypted. So we're seeing some adoptions of that for people with very variable workloads, but so they get the fixed cost benefits of owning their own servers, but the infinite capacity of the cloud still.
Yeah, so they can actually burst into the cloud and leverage that.
But most companies are staying within one environment, but they don't want to be. So they'll have an environment in Google, an environment in Amazon, an environment in their data center, but they don't want they don't want to be locked up into one. But if you're a company of any size, you're going to have multiple environments, and the ability to manage them all in a consistent way, which that's also offers a lot of value, because otherwise you end up with, Kubernetes is Kubernetes, but the way Kubernetes runs on Amazon versus Google versus your Ubuntu in your data center, they all have nuances and differences, and the way you scale them is different, and the way you have to provision your machines is different. And that inconsistency adds a fair bit of cost and complexity and overhead. And so our operating system runs the same on all environments. Our management system runs the same on all environments. So the same APIs, literally the same Kubernetes deployments on all of them. So that's one of the advantages we bring as well.
Got it. So I heard a couple things. Security, I think you talked a little bit about at the beginning, which is becoming a big deal in everything. To the ability to kind of standardize and orchestrate workloads and manage workloads, which sounds like it was kind of core to the unique differentiator you guys had. And then probably some sort of cost savings. And then for some of the really interesting use cases, there's new business opportunities, right?
And for a lot of the edge security is critical, because you're deploying a device not in a data center with biometrics and guards and cameras everywhere. You're deploying a device in a medical laboratory that may have patient confidential data on it, may have financial data on it if you're doing point of sale or retail. So the security of these edge locations is pretty key. So that's actually one thing that we excel in, because our operating system is so small. The secure boot and trusted boot, we have kind of unique capabilities there, because we can actually sign the whole operating system and user land within the secure boot system, unlike most Linux distributions. That was actually a capability that Roche Pharmaceuticals paid for us to implement. So that was a nice thing. But security is, that's kind of one of our foundational tenets, is that the whole company is based on.
Yeah, that's great. Always good to get a design partner like that. So I guess another thing you mentioned was about kind of sovereignty of data, right? You've been doing this for a long time now. As you're interacting with European customers, do you see that there's been conversation about this for a long time? Do you really think that this is the moment where people are going to be moving off of, anything not European, or just wanting to geolocate it in an area that is specific to a region? What are you kind of seeing with customers.
Yeah.
I don't think it really has to do with the macroeconomic. Macroeconomic is just chaos, but I think customers are starting to really execute their plan that I want to control my data a little bit more and have it in my region, because now it's a government regulation and they're going to start cracking down, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we do offer a SaaS for our Kubernetes management system that we run as a SaaS, but most of our customers in Europe self-host that within their own data center so that they have complete control over it. Some of the larger customers in Europe actually run out of our European data center, which is why we opened it up, because they said we would prefer to use your SaaS, but it has to be in Europe. So now we have a data center running in Amsterdam as well. But yeah, definitely the regulatory compliance is what I think is driving it, and that's been coming for a while, and it's just getting stronger and stronger. I don't think it's not the chaos. It's the ongoing EU GDPR and other regulatory compliance frameworks that are making them. And frankly, they just seem to feel better about that. I mean, it's actually a slight disadvantage that we're a US-based company. We were talking to an EU data provider, a data center yesterday, and he was like, "It's okay that you're a US-based company, but we'd prefer you to be an EU-based company." Even though the majority of our employees are in the EU, but we're incorporated in Delaware like everyone else.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe the next company will be a European company, or maybe a spin out. So let's kind of move on to some of the kind of trendy stuff. You talked a little bit about some of the use cases at the edge. Is any of that driven by AI? What are you kind of seeing customers are working on that are kind of new and interesting, whether it be something that they're adopting now or they're planning to adopt? To your point on enterprises, they have very long planning cycles. They're just getting out of their Kubernetes planning cycle that they have been working on for 3 years, and they're ready to now evaluate what you have and deploy it in 2 years. So, what are you kind of seeing with enterprises, and also what are you excited about as an entrepreneur that you see in the market right now?
Yeah, well, so AI, which everyone is talking about, we are not really an AI product because, I mean, let me clarify that. A lot of people use our products to run their AI infrastructure. Like Nokia is an example. They've got a very, very large private internal cloud with many, many hundreds of thousands of cores and NVIDIA GPUs of A200s and H200s and all of that. That's all running on our software. So we make AI easy to deploy if you're running your own server farms. That's kind of not most people's use case. The more interesting stuff is we do have customers, mostly startups, doing things like AI at the edge for image recognition, where they're watching a shop and tracking foot traffic and flows by this stand. And so you should optimize this stock over here because it's high retail value and so forth. So those are a lot of interesting things. AI in factory warehouse and automation, that's a lot of interesting stuff where there's image recognition. They have to have the GPUs and compute local at the edge to be fast enough. I was at one of our customers and they showed me their lab of what they deploy, and it's like involves they drop a package down a 6-foot long chute, and they take 10,000 photos while it's falling to identify it and see what shape it is and the orientation, and then they grab it and put it and scan it, and it's like pretty amazing stuff. But that all because this is all has to happen with very low latency while the package is still falling. So lots of interesting use cases for technology, like I said, that I haven't thought of. But we don't really embed AI into our product. We do in our documentation systems and stuff like that. But you do not want any hallucinations in your machine configuration when you're defining your Kubernetes infrastructure. It's like this has to be a completely reproducible. I create this command and it generates this output 100% reproducibly, time out of time. One of the things we do is we have completely reproducible builds so that they're signed. You can follow the supply chain from start to finish and know you're running the right software with the right thing. So we don't have any variance in our product itself. But the things that I do think AI is super exciting in, like the products that I'm using, I see it a lot, which, when we went through our SOC 2 compliance, the AI made policies and associating the controls and so forth much easier. So that's super interesting. I use it a lot in the marketing and stuff like that. But the thing that is just most exciting is just seeing Kubernetes is finding its time now. It has been like I said, a long sales and investment cycle. But now the platforms are being built. So now we are hitting customers with thousands and thousands of clusters in their scale, and it's exciting to see the adoption finally reach its promise. We've not always. We're talking to a very, very large US bank, and I think after 4 years of conversation with them, where they've appreciated the philosophy and they like the design, they've finally got to the point where they've got approval to spin it up in a lab.
Maybe another 4 years in the lab.
Yes, probably.
Gotta make sure it's safe, it's secure.
Yeah. I mean, and the headwind for us in that is, to some degree, is the fact that we are so secure, but we're secure in a different way. So these large organizations, they have their security teams, and the security teams are used to running, Nessus scans and running things, loading a kernel loadable module that can run, that is part of their integrity measurement tool and their, defense tools. Talos Linux is orchestrated so that it's got read-only file systems. You can't load dynamic kernel loadable modules because that's a security weakness. Hackers do that to hide their tracks. So we work with all the new standard security tools, but a lot of the big enterprises have older standard security tools that do not play nicely with an immutable operating system that doesn't let them load dynamic kernel loadable modules and run whatever code they want out of a bash shell. And we don't even have bash. So one of our headwinds is the security group. Hopefully that's something that we're starting to see switch, where we've seen some companies pull us in because of this from their security groups. Usually it's the architects and SREs understand our securities better and pull us in, and then have to fight with their security groups. We're starting to see that story reverse, though. So that is what it will be exciting once the security groups kind of realize the advantages of the new ways of doing things.
And is that big bank already doing Kubernetes, or is this a new thing for them? Right.
No,
so
they're doing. It's a very big bank, so they're doing everything.
Okay, and they've already had it into production. So what's the use case for you guys to get in there? Why are they pulling you guys in?
So for them, it's they spend a large amount of man hours and resources maintaining the updating and patching and securing the operating systems that they run their Kubernetes on. And they would have a huge savings avoiding that. And if we can do, which we can do like the integrity measurement architecture that basically says this system that you're deployed, it's programmatically, cryptographically verified the checksums of all the code that's running the operating system and the Kubernetes, and we validate that it's whatever this checksum, that checksum has verified it's already passed all your tests. Therefore, all this fleet of machines passes your PCI and your FIPS and your HIPAA and all other compliance. That would save them hours and hours and hours of staff time.
Okay, so I think with a lot of organizations who are reaching, sounds like their scale point and their breaking point with scale around managing things. That's where you're seeing a huge opportunity, because to your point, they have all of the clouds running. They have their own data center. They've been running in production. Now they're like, do I really want all of these people, managing, running this? And then also the cost of an error with people is usually, a bigger issue than a system, right? The systems don't make as many errors as people, unfortunately. So I think that's probably an opportunity as customers are looking at automation and things like that, right? Yeah,
that was one of Nokia's purchasing drivers, was that, they are a well-run organization with very smart engineers. So they had, configuration management and control for their fleets of servers. I forget which tool they were using, Puppet or Ansible or Chef or something like that. But they said there was always someone that would log in and change something that we hadn't thought of that would have an impact. So someone would always log in and turn on, the storage cache, where we didn't want the storage cache on that one, because then if there's a power outage, it wasn't on a UPS, so we'd end up with inconsistent data. So having a system that people could not change the configuration of, they couldn't even log in. But the only way to change the configuration is through the a GitOps flow where they check things out and do it correctly. Increased their uptime dramatically. So just by stopping people helping and fixing issues that would then break something further down the line.
Yeah, I think the AI topic has really brought out the execution of automation that we've been talking about for a long time, right? I think everyone's thinking now, okay, everyone is clearly thinking, how do I automate? How do I manage things better? And so they might be thinking, oh, how do I use AI with Kubernetes? And it very much becomes, well, how am I managing Kubernetes in the first place? And then how do I build automation on that layer and then I can kind of go do those things, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing that all executives are thinking about. How do I increase operational efficiency and reduce errors, right? And I think that's a really good example.
What you don't want to do with AI or anything else is make a bad process faster.
That's right. That's right.
Then you
that's a good tagline.
You accelerate the badness.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good bumper sticker. All right. Well, I know, Steve, we're kind of ending our time here today, but you talked a little bit about at the beginning about how you started in accounting and tech. You've been a part of different companies. You're an investor. You mentioned that some of the functions are transferable from tech companies. Maybe talk to us a little bit about your philosophy and kind of where you've gone on your journey with the different companies you worked at and where you're excited to go with Sidero here.
Yeah. Well, one thing I've certainly learned is that the technology is great, but we're all people at the end of the day. And that's the most important thing to focus on. It's like, I was a terrible manager early in my career. I'm probably still, if you ask people. So the ones that I'm really good at managing people that don't need managing. I'm getting better at managing the ones that do, but it's that's the thing that we all need to focus on. And practicing giving honest feedback is like one of the biggest skills that I think an executive can have, because that is how you get the best results out of people and show you care. It's like that's one thing that really matters that I've learned a lot in my journey. But just from a business point of view, what has surprised me is how transferable it is. It's like a monitoring company or some of the other companies I've invested in, or a Kubernetes company. The thing that matters is getting your message out to market, scaling those systems, making sure the product is being built in the right way. It's like all these things aren't really technology related. They're just universally applicable things that we need to focus on as leaders. So that was a bit of a surprise to me. I would have thought it's like, I need to be an expert in Kubernetes to be in this role. It's like, I need to understand Kubernetes and know the problems, but I don't need to know how to solve the problems in the level of like changing this YAML file to change the CNI driver. I need to understand it's like, oh, this is the problem. What you really want is this business outcome. That's kind of universal amongst all businesses. So focusing on the problem that the person has, not the solution that they're asking for, but the actual business problem that they want to be more effective in their role. That's kind of the key to it all. And then if you can convey that message, then you'll have a successful business.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. A lot of vendors go out to market talking about technology problems and solving a technical problem. But really what the customer wants is, how are you going to help me be a hero? How are you going to help me do better in my job so my boss gives me a better report card, and then also help me learn and grow, right? I think to your point, even internal employees, every customer has a next job they want to get. They also need to grow to get that next job, or have that serendipitous moment. If you can enable them to do that, you'll have a customer literally for life, right? You could start 10 companies, they will follow you to the next company you go to, because you followed through on what you're going to do for them, but then you enabled them to do the thing that they care about, right? And I think that's, if you can really get to the root of that, to your point, whether it's an internal employee, a channel partner like an MSP, or a customer, but that takes time and it takes trust, right? It's much easier just to sell them the technology they can buy on a website. So that's the challenge with investing and running these companies is managing that kind of kind of gap, which, trust takes years and transactions take seconds. So
trust takes years, and the way you build trust with an engineer is very different than the way you build trust with a VP. It's like they're completely different conversations, but you need to be able to have both.
That's right. Awesome. All right. Well, this is a great way to end the podcast, Steve. Thank you for joining. It's been great to get to know you over the last couple of years, and good luck at Sidero Labs.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Ben. I enjoyed it.
Cool. Thanks.